He charged me with resisting arrest.
Get that confidence in jail.
I object.
Good morning, fellow Patriot, and welcome to Allegedly Bravo, a podcast about all things reality crime. I'm Cash.
And I'm Lauren, aka Lo Beezy.
You know what? Let's just fucking start talking. Okay, so I read this article, at least the title. It said, after Jen Shah's arrest, how can we keep enjoying Real Housewives? Do you think that that is a true statement? Like, is there even a question of whether or not we can keep enjoying them?
I mean, duh. Are you kidding?
But it's like, that's why we like this show, because show is not a reality. Like, we want to live vicariously through other people, and we want to, unfortunately, sometimes people fail. And we want to see that, you know, like, we like the fights, we like the divorces, we like the financial drama. Like, that is why people are obsessed with reality television. So to think like, oh, now all of a sudden we've hit this moral high ground where we're no longer interested. It's like, no, I'm even more interested.
To know all of their dirty laundry is kind of like voyeuristic, and like, I kind of like
it. Yeah. And so that's a good point, because it almost is like, do you think watching Housewives is somewhat voyeuristic?
Fuck yeah.
Like,
do you?
I think so.
Yeah.
I very much, I mean, especially like, not to go off of Housewives, but talking still about Bravo related shows, Summer House. Like, I was watching it the other day with my boyfriend, and my boyfriend was like, wait, whoa. He's like, they're allowed to film them when they're sleeping? I was like, yeah. And he's like, they're having sex right now. They're having sex. And I
wait till he sees Below Deck. If he thinks that's crazy.
And I told him, I was like, that's the whole premise of the show. Like, they sign up for that. They are filmed 24/7.
Yeah.
You know, and so it's like, I tend to not feel bad for these people when their lives are, I mean, the most vulnerable moments are exposed on TV, because it's what you signed up for, and it's what the viewer wants to see. Like, the Jen Shah of it all is shocking to me, that it is shocking, and it's not shocking, because she's so narcissistic and egotistical that I don't even think it crossed her mind that she was engaged in fraudulent activity, nor did she think she was going to get caught.
I don't think I don't think that she thought that she was going to get caught. This is all my own personal belief.
Alleged.
I personally believe that Jen, like, didn't even know. I think she was so bold in her lie, and so she believed herself so hard and had such a narcissistic attitude towards everything in her life that she was like, not only can I not fail, but I can go on TV, make this entire thing even more money and more popular, and have like a network backing and get like different things. Like, she had eyelashes, she had fashion, she had this, she had that. I feel like she kind of saw it as like a way to have like a Sonia's toaster or like another item. Do you disagree?
No, I'm so fascinated by just the entire process and just where we're at, because this is such a new franchise that we're getting this in the second season.
Right. I know.
We will be getting this, I'm sorry, in the second season. But okay, so let's go back to the first season. Did you like Jen Shah the first time you saw her? Like, what was your opinion of her? No. So, why not?
Because I just have like, I have this thing for like people who feel a little too producery to me. It's like, sometimes I get this way I felt this way the entire time Lisa Vanderpump was on. Like, this is why
I feel it with Erica Jane.
I agree with you. I think there's a part of Erica Jane that's like that too. Lisa Rinna, I think, is 100% a producer, but it's like,
absolutely, you
can tell when people are like trying to make specific content and all this stuff. And like, I heard that allegedly that Shah Chalet, I mean, this is old news by this time, but was rented. And and it's just like things like that where it's like, okay, I can understand, like, I get it. The Kardashians like show a false home so that people don't come stalk them and all that. And like, I understand if Jen did it for those reasons. I know, but I don't think.
Give me a break. She was doing it for the complete the Kardashians are doing it for purposes of public safety or personal safety.
Right.
She's doing it for the purpose of showing off and trying to exhibit this life that she doesn't live. I mean, her husband is a special teams coordinator at Utah. There's no way that he's making anywhere. I bet he probably makes about $200,000 a year, if that. If that.
Not to talk sports, but my father is was an offensive line coach. And just to make things a little spicy, my dad was a former athlete of the University of Utah, where Mr. Shah currently coaches.
Stop it. You never told me that.
I know. Well, I didn't really think that it was relevant, but I'm going to talk to my dad because my dad's probably still has connections there. And so should we call him right now?
Yeah.
Hey, Pops.
Hey.
I have a question for you.
Yeah.
Do you know people that still work at Utah?
Just
in
football.
football?
People in football, yeah.
So, you ever heard of the Real Housewives, the show?
Yeah.
So she's married to the special teams coordinator at University of Utah.
What's his name?
Sharif Shah.
Okay.
And they're being prosecuted right now federally for conspiracy to commit wire fraud and money laundering. Well, the wife is, not the husband.
What?
But I just didn't know if you knew him.
No, I don't know Shaw. I know the brother of the head coach.
Would you consider a special teams coordinator a coach?
Oh yeah.
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 Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. We're just trying to do a little digging on it.
Oh yeah, dig. I can help you on that one.
Yeah,
Get
find
some
out more. All right, I'll call you in a little bit. I'm talking to Lauren.
Sounds good.
Okay, love you. Bye.
Love you. Bye.
So according to Distractify, a website, it was just my first Google search, they said that Sharif Shah made $463,000 in 2018 as a coach. Okay, so I was wrong. So I wonder.
That's a lot of money.
So he's though making close to $500,000 a year, and then Jen Shah is never really disclosed what she did on the show. The only time it truly was brought up was at the reunion, if you think about it.
Well, and she said some weird shit at that reunion. And then I found this clip and I linked it in our little links spreadsheet that I sent us.
Mm-hmm.
Where, and I'll play the clip right here, but where she was talking about what her business was on some other podcast. And the podcast,
Play it
right now.
I own 3 different marketing companies, and we do lead generation, data monetization. So it's customer acquisition. I'm basically, the best way to describe it is I'm the Wizard of Oz. I'm like the one behind the curtain that nobody knows exists, but I'm the one making everything happen. So when ads are popping to you guys, when you're like, how the hell do they know I'm shopping at Neiman Marcus? That's me.
When I was watching the first season of the Housewives of Salt Lake City, I liked Jen Shah originally, the first maybe episode. But then as she started going at Mary with like the hospital comments and just her attitude, there was something that was rubbing me the wrong way. And I told you that I couldn't stand her because I think you were a couple episodes behind me when I was watching. I told you, I think you were in your phase where you were liking her. And then I was like, I cannot stand her. And then you finally kind of caught up to that eventually, like mid-season. Because I just didn't trust her. And then when they went to the little spa thing, her, Whitney, and Heather, and she
the bathtubs and the whole crew, and like fucks with all their stuff.
Yeah. I would say Sharif's birthday and then the spa day or the sauna, what are the hot springs. That was when I saw her for who she was. And I was like, there's something going on here. Like,
I agree. And I just felt that like she tried so hard to like cause a scene wherever she went that I was like, if this is really how this person reacts, there's no way that they would want her on the show.
Okay.
She's a liability.
So the thing that really tipped me off in terms of me not trusting her was the fact that she alleged that she lived in this like grand, beautiful chalet. She had all this money. She had 7 assistants. She, always showed up to every party decked out, wearing top couture, whatever.
Right.
But there's this scene where she's getting ready and there's like a shot of her closet and she literally has like IKEA storage, and no knock to IKEA because I mean, the dresser you see behind me is from IKEA.
Right.
But for somebody who's pretending or, telling the world that she's got all this money and she's wearing the finest clothes and jewelry.
Showing up with furs to the reunion and like being extra.
Rocking like a shitty closet. And then if you look at the bedroom, like the comfort, everything in that house just doesn't seem like it fits. As if like everything was rented and then they brought all of her stuff over from their townhouse and just like tried to put it into this massive chalet.
Well, because I guarantee you that she like hired like, court fine furniture that will come like stage your open house. Like I guarantee you she just like did that.
But if you think about it, we never really saw, well, I guess we did kind of see the entire house because you see the living room, you see the bedroom, and then you see the upstairs like game area. Remember when all the guys
I don't
come
remember
over?
ever seeing like the kitchen. Do you?
Yeah, in the first season or the first episode where her and the kids are around. And
I still just would rather believe that it's all a fraud.
Oh, it is. And that is what's so okay, because we haven't really touched on it, but her whole stance, and I mean, this is very much public knowledge right now, but her whole position is that she's very innocent and has had absolutely nothing to do with this, and that she is going to walk free.
Well, what even is her stance? Because is it I have nothing to do with this? Is it I was bamboozled? Or is it you got the wrong girl?
That's a great question, because I think right now she's so cocky that she's like, I had nothing to do with it. Like, it's not fraudulent. Like, what I'm doing is legitimate. But I think ultimately her defense will probably become the bamboozled, because if she doesn't take a plea agreement, she's going to take this case to trial. It will be in front of a jury of 12 people, and the defense is obviously going to have to come up with a story and a defense and a theory. And I wouldn't be surprised if they take on this whole storyline that she was bamboozled into this. She didn't know, therefore she didn't have the intent to defraud. That's why I'm so confused that she's so vocal with the fact that she's innocent. Because I think
and the posting of the stories and the this and that, like if your client was in federal court for this and you saw her posting stories like that, like what would you do?
I would be mortified. I would, that's the hard thing about being an attorney is client control. And I mean, I obviously didn't see a lot of it when I was a prosecutor because I represented the state at that point. And
let me tell you, in family law with Facebook and Instagram, oh my God, you would get screenshots of all kinds of shit saying like Aunt Sally's a meth addict. And you're like, what? Oh my God. Like just so crazy.
Not Aunt Sally. Yeah, I would be mortified at the fact that my client was posting stories on such a public platform, because I guarantee you the prosecutor that's prosecuting this case or the assistant U.S. attorney that's prosecuting this case is watching every single story that she posted, probably has Jen Shah on her Google alerts, and is just using this as fuel for the prosecution.
Okay, so if it were me, and this is just coming from a civil background, okay? Like for me, if I received a screenshot from my client of their spouse or soon to be ex-spouse or baby mama or dada flashing just like new glam, braids, Gucci outfit, all this stuff, I would screen record everything. I would subpoena everything. And then I would be like, Your Honor, clearly this person has way too much money. There's a red flag.
I think that Jen Shah's, like going back to the narcissism, is she doesn't understand that the power that the AUSA and the United States, like the attorney's office actually has, because they have investigators, they can get search warrants, they have a team of people, and they have an authority to be able to subpoena records. They can read text messages.
So
they can get search warrants to read her text messages between her and Stu Chain. And I'm sure they already have all of that, because they had to build their case before they prosecuted or charged her.
The question that I do have for you is, I know there's like all these steps to like bringing a case and, being the prosecutor and trying to tell the judge, like, this is worthy of the time before the bench, you know?
Yeah.
So I know there's like these important steps within the federal criminal process, and I want to link them and explain them to everybody just so that they have like a resource of like the basic outline and structure of like what's going to happen. So you kind of mentioned something about like subpoenas and um an investigation and all that. And like the reason why we have an indictment, per my understanding, is because a grand jury saw a bunch of facts and stuff that were presented to them. And then they said, oh, there seems to be enough evidence here to try this case. So is it true that the first step is like an investigation? And like, what would that entail?
So, so the beginning is an investigation. Clearly, the government was tipped off some way that this fraud scheme was ongoing. They were committing.
Do you want to know what I heard?
What?
I heard that somebody who was in her glam squad was an FBI plant. Yeah, that's what I heard. And that's why during the season, some of the faces in her glam squad are blurred.
Oh.
So that's just what I heard. So like allegedly, but allegedly it's like what you were saying, like there was an informant. There was a mole in the squad.
Whoa, it's like that old school show. Okay, so
I remember that show, The Mole.
Ooh, that's so fascinating. Yeah. So okay, so just briefly in terms of like investigation and how this whole thing really came to be. Obviously, we don't have the evidence in front of us. We don't have access to that confidential information. So I'm just going to give like a brief overview of kind of what the process looks like. So what it is, and you can go on to justice.gov and they have access and they kind of lay things out in terms of like legal terms, the process.
I'll put a whole link to this entire page in like the description or something.
So in terms of charging, so what happens is the prosecutor studies the information from the investigators that are in their office and the information they gather from talking with individuals involved, witnesses. And at that point, the prosecutor decides whether they want to present the case to a grand jury. So when a person's indicted, just like Jen Shah was and Stu Chain's, they're given formal notice that it is believed that they have committed a crime. The indictment
based on the research and the investigation that was done.
Yeah, and the information that the prosecution has. So the indictment contains basic information that informs the person of the charges against them. So that's that document that's been going around that's available on the internet, the indictment for Jen Shah and Stu Chain. So for potential felony charges, a prosecutor will present the evidence to an impartial group of citizens called a grand jury. Witnesses may be called to testify. Evidence is shown to the grand jury and an outline of the case is presented to the grand jury members. The grand jury listens to the prosecution and the witnesses and then votes in secret on whether they believe that enough evidence exists to charge the person with a crime. Yes.
So the question that I have is like, when did Jen find out about this? Before or after the grand jury did their thing? Do we know?
That's a good question. I would assume that she was given formal notice after she was indicted.
So, okay. So they did an investigation, did the grand jury, we think.
Yeah. So like back when I was a prosecutor, what we would do, you would get a notice of non-prosecution, meaning the prosecution was not going to pursue charges against you. Or you would receive notice of a complaint being filed that is signed by a DA notifying you that charges are going to be filed. That process is very much different than the grand jury because in the smaller, like in misdemeanors or felonies at the state level, what you're doing is you're reviewing that evidence, making sure that, and you're making that opinion or drawing that conclusion on your own. And that you may be sitting down with other DAs, other prosecutors or other ADAs and making that decision, but you ultimately make that decision. Here, it's a group of her peers and it's 12 people or however many people are of the grand jury that are making this decision of whether or not they think that there's enough evidence to go forward. So there are times where a grand jury may decide not to charge an individual based upon the evidence and no indictment would come from the grand jury. All proceedings and statements made before a grand jury are sealed, meaning that the only people in the room have knowledge about who said what about whom. The grand jury is constitutional requirement for certain types of crimes, meaning it is written in the United States Constitution so that a group of citizens who do not know the defendant can make an unbiased decision about the evidence before voting to charge an individual with a crime. So grand juries are made up of approximately 16 to 23 members. Sorry, I said 12 because that's the general number that we use in terms of in California. But in grand juries, they can be 16 to 23. Their proceedings can only be attended by specific persons. For example, witnesses who are compelled to testify before the grand jury are not allowed to have an attorney present. At least 12 jurors must concur in order to issue an indictment. So states are not required to charge by use of a grand jury. Many do, but the Supreme Court has interpreted the Constitution to only require the federal government to use grand juries for all felony cases.
Okay, that's interesting, and I didn't know.
Yeah, so federal misdemeanor charges do not have to come from the federal grand jury. So after the defendant's charged, they can either hire an attorney, or if they are indigent, they can choose to be represented by an attorney provided by the government, which would be a public defender.
So in this case, Jen Shaw doesn't have a public defender. She has private counsel.
She has private counsel.
But if she couldn't afford it, she would be provided a public defender.
Absolutely. Because under the Constitution, everybody has a right to counsel. And so a public defender would be appointed. And you know what? I'm going to say something that might be a little controversial. I just want to stand up for public defenders briefly because they are given a lot of flack. And I will tell you, in my time working at the DA's office, at least in my position and being in the misdemeanor department, you work with these people, these public defenders, every single day. Like, we are in court together from 8:30 to 11:30. They're the majority of cases that I was assigned to and that I had were with public defenders. And you begin to have a working relationship with these people, and you grow, I would say, some type of like a respect and a professional courtesy with them. And they are given such a bad rep at times where people think that they're dumb, that they didn't, go to the best law school, that the only reason why they're public defenders is because they couldn't make it at a big firm.
That
and
they're just bleeding hearts and that's all they have going for them.
And that is just not the case. I mean, a lot of them are very bleeding hearts where they just like truly 100% believe in the system. Like, they want to help people regardless of what the crime is. Like, that is their job. They want to do everything they can to help people that are indigent, that people that can't hire counsel, because you should, under the Constitution, you should be guaranteed the right to a good attorney, competent attorney. And so I just want to say that about public defenders. They get a very bad rap, but I've always said that if my friends ever get picked up for a crime or arrested, I would honestly recommend a public defender because they're in court every day. They know the ins and outs of the system. They know they're in front of the same judge every day. The judge knows them. They know how they operate.
They know the prosecutor.
They work with the prosecutor. They've worked with multiple, and so there's somewhat of a rapport, and it can be beneficial. And that's just my little tidbit.
That's that on that.
That's that on that.
That's kind of sweet. A little shout out.
Yeah. And I think I had a really good relationship with the public defenders and our judges. And so, yeah, I just think that there's kind of a negative connotation when you hear the word public defender. And I'm here to stand up for them.
We're here to stop any speculation that is negative towards public defenders. And we're here to rise up. We're above that.
And honestly, that's my own experience in the small county that I was working in. And, obviously people have other perceptions. There are a lot of criminals out there, people that have been prosecuted for crimes that can't stand public defenders or can't stand their public defender.
Right. Okay. So then after you go through the charging and you have your indictment and the this and the that, it says that there's an initial hearing and an arraignment. And that's what we listened in on.
Yeah.
Jen got arraigned. So Jen and Stuart got arraigned at the same time.
Stewie Chains, baby.
Stewie Chains.
Yeah, and you know what? I want to look up and see if Stu Chains has a public defender because I don't know how he's affording counsel.
What do you mean? I mean, you're acting like he's poor because he's an assistant. He just defrauded over $5 million to people. Yeah, you think Jen's getting that? All of it?
I'm assuming
getting most of it.
Yeah, but I'm assuming their assets have been frozen.
Well, but they're allowed up to $5,000 a transaction unless it's legal bills, and then they can pay whatever it takes. Their legal bills are going to be almost $100,000.
Oh, their legal bills will be $500,000. I mean, it depends on how this case is handled. So let's start from the beginning. So you said like she's notified of this. So clearly she was noticed or tipped off while they were in the middle of filming Real Housewives of Salt Lake City because they were on their way. Go ahead.
Because what I had heard is that she was in the car getting ready to go to the jet that was going to take them on Boulder, Colorado trip. Yeah. Allegedly, this is what I've heard. And she was in the car with Heather and I love it, Lisa, who I love. I love Lisa.
I'm so sexually attracted to her husband, but that's a topic for a different day.
Oh, okay. Well, we can definitely get into that and I'll agree with you there. But she was allegedly in the car with everybody and like Heather was there. Heather's like experiencing trauma from this as well, like all this stuff. And apparently she got a phone call and it was from Sharif because what I had heard is allegedly, sorry, I had like, you know, the wine burp.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's deep where it might come up.
It wasn't even that. It was like, I need to swallow my breath and hiccup at the same time. So anyway, apparently the FBI and the SWAT and all them showed up at Jen Shah's home and Sharif was like, yo, she's not here. And so they were like, well, where is she? And he's like, I literally don't know. I think she's going to Colorado. And then they came to follow the car. Sharif called Jen, tipped her off.
Yeah.
Jen goes, oh my God, somebody came to wherever they were driving, like drove really fast to meet the production van. Jen goes, oh my God, allegedly, Sharif's in the hospital. I gotta go. And so she hops out of the van and into somebody's car. And that's when they were met with SWAT.
Do you know who somebody was whose car she jumped into?
The lady with no legs.
Yeah.
I heard that was a rumor. Is that true?
I mean, alleged. It's all alleged, but I refuse to not I refuse.
I agree. To not believe that. Like
I refuse to not believe it because this is it's what we need. And the fact that
it is what we need.
She had those fucking crazy misappropriated braids in her hair.
I can't even speak on that as a white woman because it's like I just have no clue. But to me, I feel like I'll just leave it there. I can't speak on it.
Yeah.
So then after all the arraignment and stuff, and that's when they pled guilty, right?
But who am I to talk? Because when I was 12 and 13, I would constantly go to the beauty schools to get my hair braided because I wanted to look like Beyonce. Because I just loved Destiny's Child with that photo. Their CD album where they're like all in silver and she has cornrows and I just thought she was so beautiful and so
it gives my full body the tingles in a way that's like I just admire her so much. And we weren't trying to be offensive. You were just trying to be a child and you were a kid and I did it too. You're not alone. But okay, so we were in the phone call on the arraignment. What?
Yes. I'm trying to close my stand goal. So I'm going to stand
up. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. So we were on the phone call. You were there before me.
Oh, I was there before you. So I heard a little bit. I didn't hear any of the Stu Chains because I was like, I think I was asleep. But then I heard the Jen Shah of it all and they read the thing. She says not guilty, blah, blah, blah. And then they read the bail stuff. And the bail stuff was she had to pay.
It was, wasn't it $1 million bond, but 250 cash?
I think so. And it had to be secured. Okay. So let me actually Google it.
Okay. Got it.
Jen Shah bail.
Yeah. I want to say it was $1 million, but she had to secure 250 and that could be cash or property.
Right.
Because I know that when we were on the call, Stu Chain's attorney was saying that he didn't have he didn't have the ability to acquire $250,000 in cash. And so he was trying to they asked the judge if he could use his house because I guess he has that in equity. And the judge said, yeah.
Right. So he had it in equity, whereas Jen didn't. So that's where I'm going to say maybe Stu Chains is better off to defend this legally.
Yeah, you might be right on that.
So I just want to read it right here because I have the quote from the judge himself, Mr. Sidney Stein, which we just love that, a
honorable
U.S. Judge Stein.
Honorable.
You say honorable? Okay, Honorable Stein. Honorable Stein says, I do think there's a risk of flight here. And then said that the person, Jen Shah, had to post $1 million in personal recognizance bond secured by $250,000 in cash or property, which is what you were talking about with Stu Chains. And 2 co-signers have to sign on that bond, which begs the question, who the fuck would co-sign on that?
I know. That was my initial thought, is I wonder who in the world would do that. I mean, it would have to be a family member, and it would have to be, but the thing is the bond is only there to ensure that she does not flee and she doesn't leave. So it's not like when she takes a plea deal, or if she's, convicted or what, like they're gonna lose that money. It's the purpose of it is just to make sure that she does not leave.
So if she pays that money and then they find her like not guilty, or after the whole thing, say they even do find her guilty, like, does she get that money back?
The bond, oh God, this was like the one area, because we used to have bond hearings all the time, but it wasn't us. It was
like a bond team.
It's like Aladdin bail bond and stuff. So
would they call
so
it
your bond?
the bond girls?
No. My understanding is like your bond will be exonerated, and so if you enter a plea, they'll exonerate the bond so that it's no longer.
Ow! I have like sore head so bad.
Oh, is your ponytail too tight?
Yeah, because I had it in braids that I braided while wet, and then I put it in one of these ponytails that's like all secure. Oh, but these are the best. They don't let your hair move at all.
Yeah, but then you have, I don't know. Okay, so at the arraignment, I want to touch on something, because there are a lot of articles, and we read it in one of the spilling the tea or some article, where people are like, of course, Jen Shah enters a not guilty plea, like not owning up to what she did.
Right.
So whenever somebody is arraigned on criminal charges, they always enter a plea of not guilty. It is standard practice, because you are being arraigned on charges of, in this case, conspiracy to commit money laundering and conspiracy to commit wire fraud. So she has to enter into a plea, and 99.99999% of the time, I would almost go to say 100% of the time, defendants say not guilty, because you have to enter a plea. You're not going to plead guilty without seeing the evidence. Some people may.
What would happen if she pled guilty? What would happen
if she pled guilty? I mean, it's such like an unrealistic hypothetical.
But do they go, if you plead guilty, do you immediately get the sentence?
So generally what they do, especially in a case like this, they'll put it over for judgment and sentencing. So they'll put it out. So what they'll do is she'll meet with a probation officer or parole officer and the probation department, and they'll do a full investigation on her. They'll sit down, they'll meet with her, they'll talk to friends and family. And then the prosecutor will submit a judgment and sentence recommendation. That's going to be if she goes to trial and she's convicted. The prosecution, God knows what they'll ask for, but I guarantee she's going to enter a plea deal. I think that would be the smartest move, because she's facing, I think, up to $500,000 at least in fines.
What's a plea deal? What is that?
So plea deals it's just an opportunity for the defendant to, be held accountable and take responsibility for a crime they committed, but maybe.
So it's like a punishment they agree to. It's like, look, I totally did it. And like, instead of going to jail for 10 years, which is what the judge would have done, like, because I admitted it and didn't make everyone go through a trial, like, I'll agree to plead guilty and go for 5 years instead of maybe 10.
Yeah. And so the whole point of a plea deal generally is a majority of, like 90% of cases are resolved prior to a trial. So they resolve by a plea deal. And so it's basically the prosecution looking at the strength of their case, looking at the weaknesses of the case, the defense looking at the strengths of the case, and also potential deficiencies or weaknesses. And so what they do is they'll throw terms around, like the prosecution in this case might be willing to settle this case for 10 years in prison, but the defense might want no jail time. They might just want probation. And so they're going to go back and forth, but at the same time, the prosecution might not even have an offer. And so I don't know where the prosecution is at this time, but sometimes they'll offer plea agreements because she doesn't have a criminal history. And it gives the defendant an opportunity to be held accountable, but also, you know, be less restrictive in terms of punishment and give somebody an opportunity to be rehabilitated, in this case, outside of custody, because she does have children. So I'm assuming that's going to be a huge pitch that they make. But
like, she has children. She's not a first-time offender, so they probably wouldn't go through like
I don't know. That's the thing. Like, I truly don't know, because I don't know the severity of this crime, because I don't know how many victims there are. We don't really know the specifics. And so that's why it's really up in the air in terms of whether or not there's going to be a plea deal, what that plea deal will look like, whether or not the prosecution will be looking for jail time, whether they won't. I mean, what I will tell people to look at is a good comparison, obviously, is the Varsity Blues scandal, the college scandal. I mean, Lori Loughlin served prison time. Felicity Huffman served prison time. So they served very minimal terms. I think they were just like 18 months, 9 months. And even Teresa Giudice, I think she did about 18 months in prison.
Yeah, she did a little over a year, I think.
And so those are smaller terms. I would assume Jen Shah is going to get something, and Stu Chain will get something a little bit more severe, because it sounds like there's quite a few victims. And it sounds like, I mean, it sounds like the feds have been watching her for quite some time, because they said that it's been going on for about 12 years, I think.
Well, and I think we'll go over the indictment later, but before we go over that, after the arraignment, we said like pleading guilty and not guilty, and you talked a little bit about plea bargaining, but there's something before that that says discovery, and I know what that is, but I don't know if people listening know what discovery is. So I kind of just want to talk a little bit about that. So like in my experience, discovery, and like I did divorce and custody and family law issues. So we would do like, it's basically things that you could use for evidence that are relevant to the charges that are brought against this person, or the reason the lawsuit is posted in the first place. So like in family law, discovery would be bank statements to show how much was in a bank account at the date of separation, custody calendars, sometimes drug tests, like all that kind of stuff. So in this case, it would probably be something like wiretapping and things like that. But from my understanding, is discovery is like the information that you can gather from subpoenas and all that to like sort of give more weight to the plea bargaining. Like, hey, we have all this evidence against you. We have all these phone calls of you being recorded saying that you're scamming XYZ or doing ABC. And so that would make the plea, you know, like, okay, well, then we'll give you, instead of 10 years, 8 years. And then Jen could be like, well, maybe we do 7. Can she counter?
Yeah, I mean, that's the whole point of a plea agreement is, I mean, you're going to go back and forth in terms of negotiations and the defense. And that's why when you ask, why do people not enter into a guilty plea at arraignment? Because if you have an attorney, which majority of the time you do, the attorney is going to advise against that. And they are going to ask for an opportunity to review all discovery. And what discovery is it's all the evidence the prosecution has. And so the prosecution is held to a higher standard, where they have to discover over all exculpatory evidence. And so they have to hand over everything that they have, because the defense is entitled to that. And the defense has a right and an opportunity to review everything that the prosecution has. And so I think a lot of times when people see these trials that are on TV or in movies, like you always get that moment in the courtroom where you're like, oh my God, I didn't know you were going to call this witness. Like that is
right.
It's all theatrical and it's all dramatic. That is not how the real world works.
Like you literally have to tell the other side the witness you're going to use, or else you can't use the witness.
Yeah, and you have
unless it's for impeachment and stuff, but we don't have the time. We just simply don't have the time.
So in terms of, so what the prosecution at arraignment, at least in terms when I worked in misdemeanors, we handed discovery over immediately, because there are specific requirements and statutes and codes that you have to turn it over within a specific time period, especially if you're going to trial. And so I'm assuming at arraignment, defense was handed all the discovery. That will be electronic discovery, any recordings they have, all physical discovery, like in terms of witness statements, everything that they have, police report, investigative reports. And so if there was allegedly this FBI informant that was working for Jen Shah, his statements, like the defense will have all of that. So the defense will look that over. And then the parties will sit down and say, like, defense will probably look at the evidence and make a determination of whether or not, one, it's a triable case. And if it's not a triable case, meaning that the evidence is so heavy against her that they need to work with the prosecution, then the defense will go to the prosecution and say, hey, look, like, we're willing to work with you here. Like, what are we looking at? And then the prosecution will say, oh, hey, we're looking at 1 year to 5 years in prison, or, hey, we're willing to offer 2 years in prison with 10 years probation. So it's really, I don't know where they're at because I don't know what the evidence looks like, but it sounds like Jen Shah's pretty confident that she is not guilty and innocent in this.
Right. Well, I mean, it sounds like Jen Shah thinks that, but it also sounds like, no offense to Jen Shah, but I feel like the US government has bigger balls than Jennifer Shah.
I just don't think that she understands the amount of resources that the government has in terms of building their case, and probably the amount of conversations they have that are recorded,
Right.
the text messages that they have, because it's a big deal. And the fact that she's being charged with conspiracy leads me to believe that she's going to be convicted, or she's going to at least have to enter into some type of plea agreement.
So I want to talk about the conspiracy thing, but I kind of want to do it later when we go through the indictment.
Yeah.
But the other thing I was kind of thinking about is, like, the next step after plea bargaining is like a preliminary hearing.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't really know what that is. Like, after you have the arraignment, why would you even need a preliminary hearing? Because a hearing is just like a time in court that you can say whatever that you like ask the court to come say.
Yeah.
But isn't that what trial's for?
So a prelim is, I've never done one. They only take place within felonies, and felony charges. What it is, it's kind of like a trial before the trial.
Okay.
And so the prosecution basically puts on this little mini trial to see whether or not there's enough evidence to move forward with an actual trial. And so the defendant will either be held to answer or held not to answer. So if they're held to answer, that means the judge has reviewed all the evidence before the court and said, hey, look, there's enough here for the jury to review. I think that elements could potentially be met here. And so I'm going to leave it up to the trier of fact to make this decision. Or
the trier of fact is the judge.
The trier of fact is the jury.
Oh, right. Sorry, I come from civil, so it's like,
yeah, you guys don't have family law. You don't have juries.
Family law doesn't have juries. Yeah.
So you have the trier of fact, which would be then the jury. Then there's times where the judge reviews the evidence and says, hey, look, there's not enough here, so they're not going to be held to answer. And what happens then is goodbye, case goes bye-bye. But in felony, I'll have to look in terms of federal charges. In felony, if they're not held to answer, I believe they can still prosecute them again.
Oh, interesting. So it would be like a double jeopardy situation.
No, because
double jeopardy, for people who don't know, just means that, like, you can't be found guilty of the same crime twice.
No, you can't be found not guilty and then prosecuted again.
So once you've been found not guilty, they can't bring it up unless there's like evidence that they didn't know existed before.
No.
Well, like, if they didn't have the body before, then they have the body and the guy's like semen is all over it.
But you can't prosecute the same person twice for the same offense.
Unless there's exculpating circumstances, I think.
No, exculpatory is evidence that goes to innocence.
Oh, well, I thought it was like, unless there's, who cares? Whatever. It doesn't even matter. So then after that, we go to trial, and that's when you were talking about the 12 people that are the jury of the own peers, right?
Mm-hmm.
And the prosecution puts on their evidence, the defense puts on their evidence, and then the jury deliberates and decides whether they think that this defendant is guilty or not guilty. And then after that, they render what they think their decision is. And then there's something called post-trial motions.
So post-trial motion would be all your appeals.
Okay.
Yeah. And that's for a later time, but generally that's the post-trial motions.
And then they have like sentencing, and the judge will tell them like, you got to go to jail, Buster, jail, or pay a fine, or.
Oh no, Jen's not going to jail if she gets convicted or enters a plea. She's going to prison.
Oh, what the fuck is the difference?
So prison is at a state level or federal level. Jail is your county. So like every county has a jailhouse. It's generally where, if you get a DUI, you get a little drunk, you commit your random, misdemeanor offense, low level felony. But a lot of people, who commit murders and stuff are also housed in county jail, but that's for purposes of transfer. Like they will eventually be transferred to prison.
Uh-huh.
Federal, she's going to federal prison. And I'm sure there's, just like Teresa Giudice, she went to like one of those, sorry, my nose ring is coming out. She went
to
one of those like
cheers.
She went to one of those kind of, Orange is the New Black prisons, which
was like a bougie one that like
yeah, and that's what
Martha Stewart went to.
Yeah, and that's what people need to remember. Like people that are low-level criminals who have no prior criminal history, they're not going to send them to like Pelican Bay, or like San Quentin. Like you're not going to like like
it's like they're going to the ones where it's like how Teresa Giudice like left prison and then became like a bodybuilder. It's like that's what if Jen does go to prison, which she might just pay money just based on the COVID situation of it all. Like anyway, so
she's only wishing this happened during COVID, like pre-COVID, because now, I mean, they're vaccinating everybody. I would bet my life that she's going to go to prison.
Okay. So
unless there's some type of evidentiary issue or something was unlawfully obtained that could potentially just like totally swipe. Is that the right word? Like,
yeah, like kind of like how people don't get read their Miranda rights and then
like some procedural technicality.
Right. Okay, well, that being said, I think that that's like a really good introduction to like the just general legal system.
Yeah.
I feel like I'm well informed. I mean, obviously you're well informed, but I feel like that makes me comfortable enough to like get into the real meat and potatoes. I don't know if that's something that you're ready for or not.
Oh, I'm so ready to get into the meat and potatoes.
Well, I have this much wine left. Do you have enough?
Yeah, but
well, why don't we come back next week where we'll go through the whole indictment and like, kind of like go through item by item and talk about it and explain what all of this means. Now that we have like the skeleton outline, let's fill it in.
Yeah, and I'm just like, what I really want to do some research on is Stu Chain's background, because I'm fascinated by that, because I think that Jen Shah's like inner circle is like a metaphor for how she runs her businesses. Like she preys on vulnerable people who maybe, I'm trying to think of the right word. Validation. Like people that are in validation, people who want to be popular, who want to be like hanging out with the cool girl, the rich girl. And
and she gives the whole thing like, I've got your back. I'm a friend to you, so that you feel like, oh my God, like I owe this person so much because they have been a friend to me. Like they did stand up for me. And it's like a friend should just stand up for you.
Oh, and all of those little minions running around her are going to turn on her in a split motherfucking second.
Listen, I'm a Lisa Barlow lover. I love her. I think she's an icon. I do wonder where she's at mentally with this whole thing, because at the reunion, she did stand up for, she was the only person on Jen's side.
She did, but I think that there's definitely going to be a little change of heart, and I think the alliances are going to shift. And unless she's just like ride or die and like she's still backing her.
She kind of seems like she is. But okay, so should we like get a refill and then come back?
Yeah, let's get a refill, come back.
Okay, well, thanks for listening to Allegedly Bravo. I hope that was entertaining to you guys. I felt very entertained talking with a true professional, a true queen, a true criminal justice system queen who's just fully immersed in it. Thank you so much for telling us about all these weird stats and this like jargon that is so difficult to understand.
It has been so fun. And you know what? We just want to thank you guys, to our 1 or 2 listeners that have tuned in, who have made it all the way to the end. We appreciate you. And I can't wait to get into, like you said, like the meat and potatoes of it, like the juicy, just salacious drama. And I can't wait for it to unfold week by week.
I agree with you. I'm so excited. Okay. Cheers. Court is
Cheers.
adjourned. Oops.